Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of LitFestX. We are joined by Dorie Clark from the United States. Dorie is a very well-known marketing and strategy consultant and a very frequent contributor to magazines and journals like Harvard Business Review, Entrepreneur, and Forbes. She's been a consultant to a very diverse range of leading clients from across the globe, including the World Bank, Microsoft, Google, and many others. She's also an adjunct professor of business administration at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. And we are here talking to her about her recent book, Reinventing You. Dorie, welcome to LitFestX.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be speaking with you. I'm actually in Dubai today, so I'm speaking to you from there. And some of the things that I'm proudest of in terms of various institutions that I've spoken for is during some of my trips to India, I've spoken at Tata and Mahindra. So it's been a real pleasure for me to get to spend time traveling around India and getting to know Indian corporations as well.
Great, Dorie. And about reinventing you, clearly there is much sort of talk both in popular press as well as management literature about how executives and individuals today need to keep reinventing themselves to stay relevant. Yeah, and clearly you've done a lot of research, and you've got some strong insights in this area of how one can reinvent their brand and imagine a new future. So tell us a little bit about your initial findings and your around the subject.
Yes, absolutely. I first became interested in the subject actually based on my own experience because I started my career as a journalist and I was laid off after about a year on the job. And subsequently, over my 20s, had a number of different careers working as a presidential campaign spokesperson in the US, running a nonprofit, making documentary films, and finally settling into the career now that I've had for the past decade, writing business books and doing marketing strategy consulting. But what I learned at each step along the way is that other people are not paying very close attention to what you're doing. I mean, outside of your very close family and friends. And so as a result, they are not necessarily aware of the skills that you've gained in the interim or where you're intending to be headed in your career. And even if you've been staying at the same job, that's true. You might have come in as a junior employee and now 5 years later, you've got a serious array of skills. You may have gone back for a degree or extra training, and they still think of you as the little intern. And we need to take control of changing our reputation in other people's minds. Otherwise, we are not going to be top of mind for them when it comes to the kind of promotions or job opportunities or ability to serve on the kind of plum projects that can really advance our career. So that's why I think it's so crucial for reinvention. The other thing that I'll actually just mention briefly is that in the course of researching the book, I interviewed a gentleman named Stephen Rice, who at the time was the head of human resources for Juniper Networks in Silicon Valley. And he's actually subsequently moved on to be the chief human resources officer of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And something he mentioned to me, which I thought was very apt, is that when he is interviewing senior candidates for positions, he always asks the question, how are you reinventing yourself? And the reason he says that that's so critical for him to ask is that if he's hiring someone today, the job he's hiring them for in the next 2 years is probably going to be markedly different just because the world is changing that fast. And he wants to have confidence that they know how to reinvent themselves along with how the job is progressing.
Right. Very interesting point you mentioned, Dorie. I mean, clearly, a lot of the individuals sometimes have this apprehension about projecting themselves, or if one can say, marketing themselves, or doing some amount of personal PR. Is that they don't want to be seen as hungry for attention. But I think the opening statement that you made, that the world and people around you not always know what you're up to, and they aren't keeping track of you. So it's important for you to keep sort of giving people updates in a way. Now whether that update is by defining your brand, or really a Twitter update, or a Facebook status today. That's really well put, I must say. So when you're, Dory, talking about defining your brand, tell us a little bit about, how can an individual sort of define their brand ground up, and what is that process really like?
Yeah, so that's an important question. And just to speak briefly to the point that you made, I think it is really important to draw out that some people feel hesitant to engage in anything remotely approaching personal branding, or even thinking about their personal brand, because they think that somehow it lacks humility, or that it will be negatively viewed by people as a form of bragging. And certainly, every culture has its variety. I know in India there's the sort of crabs in a bucket idea, that you want to pull down the person who may be the most successful. And I think that it's a valid concern, but nonetheless, I think that it's really important to note that being smart about your personal brand does not mean bragging or making other people feel bad. You don't have to be waving a flag and saying, I am the greatest, you need to hire me, or you need to pay attention to me. Instead, sometimes all it takes is just deliberate focus. I know that in many conferences or meetings or networking events, there are these moments, right? You ask somebody that you haven't seen for a while, so what have you been up to lately? And oftentimes, this is this chief opportunity. People will just say, oh, nothing much, or oh, I've just been doing the same old, same old. And it's like, no, you need to have something concrete to say, even if it's just a small thing, to say, oh, well, I've been working on a really exciting project lately. Here's what I've been up to. That's a moment where you can actually tell people, you can show them, not by bragging, but just informing them about what you've been doing in a very strategic way, so that they say, oh, wow, I didn't know he did that. That's pretty interesting. And it begins to reshape their perception of who you are. So just looking for those small touch points can be very powerful in shifting how people think of you over time. But to your latter question about how you can begin to do this, and to begin the reinvention process, I think there's fundamentally three steps when it comes to personal reinvention, as I talk about in Reinventing You. The first is recognizing where you're starting, because everyone has a personal brand. None of us is a blank slate. People think something about you. And the first step is really understanding what that something is, and does it match what you would hope that it would be. The second phase is then becoming deliberate about what your future vision is. How would you like people to think of you? And if there's a gap between where you are now and where you would like to be, as is often the case for most people, what do you need to do to shift that? Sometimes it involves actually gaining new skills so that you're ready to move in a new direction. Sometimes you may already have the skills, but it's about learning how to tell your story better, so that you can explain to other people the narrative of how you got from point A to point B. And then the final step is what I call living out your brand, which is taking action so that in everything that you do, you are sending a very consistent message to people about who you are. And that could be everything from thinking about how you dress and dressing in a more professional manner, to getting involved in certain professional associations so that people begin to see you as a leader. It could be starting to create content online, whether it's a well-curated Twitter feed or blogging about your industry, so that people really can see with their own eyes that you know what you're talking about.
You mentioned some very interesting sort of, if I can call them, building blocks. And in your own experience, when you're working with some of these large clients, and I'm sure accomplished individuals as well, have you seen some key or standard factors which you believe have held people back from doing this? Whether some of their own issues or emotions that they are dealing with, or inhibitions. Tell our viewers, what do you see as common issues that people haven't really engaged more in their own sort of personal brand?
Well, I would say I think there's probably three major issues that are holding people back from engaging with their personal brands in a strategic fashion. The first is people who are so busy just executing the job that they are paid to do that they don't really take the time to lift their heads up and look around and say, oh, maybe I should be thinking about my own career. They perhaps make the assumption that it is sufficient to just do their job well and that that's all they need for professional success. Maybe they assume they're going to be with the same company their whole life, so it doesn't matter. But increasingly, that's changing. It's not a wise idea to just assume that'll be the case. Of course, you want to work hard and do a good job, but it is really important to make sure that you're also thinking about your own long-term professional reputation. So I think part of it is just those folks who are so narrowly focused they never take a moment to get their heads out of the weeds and think about strategy. The second, as we were alluding to earlier, is people who may have I'll call it a sort of cultural or moral prohibition that they feel about personal branding. I have done some articles for the Harvard Business Review with a colleague of mine named Andy Malinsky at Brandeis University about cultural issues in personal branding. And he told me that he actually interviewed someone. And so personal branding, it turns out, is one of the key issues that when we think about cross-cultural barriers in communication, this is a really big one because it varies rather dramatically across cultures. And he told me that he had interviewed a gentleman from India about his views on personal branding. And the gentleman told him that he actually felt that it was a sin to be promoting himself too much. He actually used that strong of language. And I think most people probably aren't that extreme, but it points to the fact that for some people, it really feels wrong if you are drawing attention to yourself in some way. And so I really want to push back and make the point that this is not about bragging. This is not about unduly drawing attention to your accomplishments. Instead, it is actually a win-win, because if you are clear about what you do best and you make your employer and your colleagues aware of that, that actually means that they're more likely to steer projects to you where you can excel. That is not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, because it means you can do a better job for yourself and for them. And then when it comes to the third category of why people fall down on personal branding, oftentimes I think that it's I'll call it just sheer negligence, that they assume that if they are making a transition, if they are reinventing themselves, they think that it will take care of itself. Oh, well, I'll just start doing new things and then people will get it. They'll just notice. But because people are so overloaded, they're so overwhelmed these days, they really don't have time to pay close attention to what you're doing. And it's a dangerous assumption to think, oh, they'll figure it out, because most of the time they won't. They either won't notice, or if they do come up with an explanation, it will probably not be advantageous to you. It'll probably be very haphazard. So you need to take responsibility for crafting your own narrative.
Very interesting, Dorie. When you're talking about saying taking charge, have in your experience, when people have to completely reinvent themselves, as you say, imagining a new a new future, and that reinvention process, do you believe that people have the tools to sort of do it themselves, or do they need consultants such as yourselves to sort of help them step by step along the way?
So I think people can turn to consultants or career counselors, but I would actually say that the vast majority of people have within themselves what is necessary to do a successful reinvention. Part of the reason that I wrote the book Reinventing You is that because I had changed careers frequently and had noticed this myself, that other people were not necessarily following or were not necessarily aware of the transitions I was making, I wanted to write a book in which I interviewed dozens of other successful professionals who had reinvented themselves in positive and successful ways, so that I could then begin to reverse engineer what they did and create a roadmap so that other people who were thinking about a reinvention or were in the midst of doing so could have a guide to do it in a simpler and more effective and more direct fashion. Because I think for me, I figured it out, but there was a lot of fumbling around. There was a lot of perhaps taking unnecessary steps. And so I wanted to write a book that would enable people to really be able to see for themselves, oh, here are the clear steps to take. And when you follow that, it makes your reinvention process a lot simpler and a lot more seamless. And so I would say, yes, certainly you can hire someone if you want, but I think that with some relatively simple guideposts like Reinventing You and some other career books that I like, there's some great things. One that I especially like is called "What Should I Do with My Life" by Poe Bronson. There are some other classics out there in the field, Clayton Christensen and James Allworth and my colleague Karen who used to be the head of Harvard Business Review, Karen Dillon. They collaborated on a book called "How Will You Measure Your Life?" That's another really great book from Harvard Business Review Press, all to enable people to begin to really think about how to craft your career, how to reshape it into something that is powerful and meaningful for you.
Right. Dorie, the proverbial question now, how does one use social media, to bring about this reinvention? Because clearly, I think any reinvention strategy of the, personal brand would be empty without a strong dose of social media today.
Right, absolutely. So social media is a critical element in this. I would say that one of the best ways that you can use social media with your reinvention is to begin to establish expertise in your new area. Because oftentimes the people around you, it's not that they want to be jerks, but they may be a little skeptical of your reinvention. They may say, "But you spent your whole life as a lawyer. What do you know about marketing?" Or, "Oh, well, we know you're good at human resources, but, starting your own business, how could you do that?" And so people think they're being helpful by raising these doubts, but oftentimes it's not helpful. It's not what you need. You want encouragement, and yet they keep kind of poking at you. And so one of the things that is necessary as part of your reinvention campaign is to essentially prove to the people around you that you really do know what you're talking about, that you really have thought this out. And so social media is powerful because, especially if you're using a tool like blogging, where you have to write these sustained, let's say 700-word essays, Twitter is good because you can send out tweets about an industry and it shows, oh yeah, you're reading articles, you're following things, you're keeping up. That's great, but it doesn't necessarily it shows interest, but it doesn't necessarily show mastery. But if you're blogging or creating original content, maybe you've launched a podcast or a video series or something like that, it enables you to show either people you've just met who don't know anything about you, or potential skeptics or naysayers in your circle that you really are you've done your homework, you're pretty knowledgeable about this new area. And it begins to allay their concerns and put to rest doubts so that then they're able to get behind you, to fall in line, and to be able to be supportive to you the way that you need them to be. Because those people that you already know are going to be an invaluable source of potential new clients or referrals, or the people that connect you to the people that can hire you for your next job. So you really do want them on your side, and social media can be a very valuable tool in getting them that place.
Right. Dorie, at this point, we've got a few questions coming up on social media from our viewers who are seeing you live. Probably we can take one or two of those. So the question is going to show up on your screen, and then you can respond to it.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
So this one says, do you think personal brand is rising and corporate one is declining due to failure to adjust?
Yeah, good question, Shivanji. Thank you. So I actually think that her point is a pretty good one, in that in some ways it is a zero-sum game between a corporate brand and a personal brand. Meaning, I mean, they also can overlap, but in its barest form, if I am in a really strong position because I I am well known. I have a strong social media following. People in my field know who I am. That gives me more bargaining power over a corporation. If they want to hire me, well, I have a lot of other suitors, essentially. And so I'm probably able to get a better salary or better position or better terms. Whereas if no one knows who I am, but everybody has heard of this big corporation, then I'm probably going to feel awfully lucky to get to work for them because I will bask in the reflected glow of their brand. Now, when you come together, a strong personal brand and a strong corporate brand, that's great. That's a great synergy because you can help each other. If I do go to work for that company, then maybe the combined power of our brands can attract new clients and customers. But you do have to be aware of these power relationships. And thanks to the internet and social media, it's much more possible for individuals to have strong brands these days as compared to corporations, which have historically had that power. So I do think there's a shift at play, and it's something that if an individual professional is smart about, they can take advantage of.
Right. The next question here is, it says, I think your attitude is a personal brand accessory. What's your view on it?
All right. And I always like getting questions over the internet from dogs, so that's a good thing to have as well. You know, as they say on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. So I love it when they type in questions. I think you're absolutely right. Your attitude is a personal brand accessory. I mean, some people think of personal brand in very narrow terms. They say, oh, your personal brand is your elevator pitch. Your personal brand is the, 1 or 2 sentence statement that you say about yourself. And I would argue, yes, that's a piece of it, but it's only a tiny piece of it, because really your personal brand is just the totality of your reputation. It's everything that people think about you. And so as a result, what shapes how people think about you? Well, your personality, your attitude is a huge part of it. If I am eager and positive and always willing to pitch in, that is going to be looked upon a lot more favorably than someone who might be smart or might be talented, but is always a little bit surly and whatever. Who do you want around you? You want the positive person around you. So I think being mindful of that actually is very important.
We'll take our last question now. This one says, isn't it a personal economy? I think personal branding is bigger, more important than any form of branding.
Yeah, Krishna, great point. I think that it really is a form of economic security or career security for you to have a powerful personal brand. And essentially the reason that I say this is I know from firsthand experience, it's very easy to lose a job. I mean, I was a newspaper reporter, and the news industry was really just starting to collapse at the time that I entered it. And so you get laid off, and what do? If you don't have a lot of connections, if you don't have a strong reputation in your field or amongst your colleagues, you can struggle for a really long time in order to get hired and be able to make a living for your family. But if you do have a strong personal brand, you're going to be snapped up. And in my new book, Stand Out, which actually just came out a few months ago, I tell the story of a guy who was in his 50s, who was living in England, and he had worked his whole career for one company, 20 or 30 years, and he unexpectedly got laid off from them, and he was really depressed. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he actually had built up such a strong personal brand in his industry. He immediately started to get inundated with job offers. They hadn't come to him before because they just assumed, well, if you've been 25 years at a company, you're probably not going to change. But once he was available, he was just deluged with offers. And as a result, it was things he had never considered. And so a few months later, his company realized they had made a mistake and that he was very valuable, and they wanted to invite him back to his old job. And he actually at that point said, no, sorry, no thanks. I've gotten better offers. And that's the position that we all want to be in, to have that level of career security. And that is what a strong personal brand can give you. So I think absolutely it's worth investing in. One quick note that I'll actually mention for folks who may be watching this is that if you're interested in increasing your own career security, I actually created a free resource that people can download from my website. It's a free 42-page workbook that's a self-assessment with questions that can lead you through to come up with your own breakthrough ideas that you'll be known for. My website is dorieclark.com, which is DORIECLARK.com, and folks can get that 42-page workbook for free right on the homepage.
Great. Thank you, Dorie, for giving us some insights into the world of personal brand building and how one can use some of these tips and really reinvent their future by reinventing themselves. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers will be happy to, take that free workbook off your website. As we bring this session to an end, is there any message you would like to give about LitFestX?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm just really excited to be part of it. India is one of my favorite places. I've spent well over a month traveling around India, and I hope to go back again soon. And so, whenever I connect with Indian readers, it's a real pleasure. And so, I'm very glad that you're organizing this, and thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you, Dorie, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.